I'm about to tell you something most people in business would never admit. I was raised in a religious cult from birth, and the things I learned inside that environment are the reason I understand identity, team building, and human behavior at a low level most people never will, and I'm about to teach you the secrets of that cult. You see, most companies focus on outcomes and processes, hit your numbers, follow the system, but there are really three levels of behavior change. Outcomes, what you achieve. Level 2, processes, what you do. And the deepest, level 3, identity, who you believe you are. You see, most companies focus on level 1 and level 2, but elite companies engineer level 3. Because when identity changes, outcomes and processes change automatically. The difference is one word. I want to be a top performer versus I am a top performer. Want is an aspiration. Am is an identity, present tense, definitive, non-negotiable. Research by Peter Burke and John Stetz at the Identity Control Theory, people are intrinsically motivated to maintain consistency between their identity and their behavior. Mismatch creates psychological discomfort, and they'll either change their behavior to match the identity, or they'll change their identity to match the behavior. So your job as a leader is to anchor the elite identity first, so behavior automatically follows. Behavior always follows identity. You think about like a military boot camp. You see, the military doesn't try to motivate recruits. They engineer an identity transformation. On day one, the civilian identity is systematically dismantled. They give them haircuts, they put on uniforms, they lose their personal items, and group identity is immediately installed. You are Marines. It's reinforced through rituals, through saluting, through cadence, through uniform standards, and the constant language of this is who we are. By graduation, recruits don't aspire to be Marines, they are Marines. That identity persists for decades. Now, think about the takeaway. The identity shift happens through 4 steps. The first one is dismantling an old identity, installing a new group identity, and then reinforcing it through rituals and languages. And then it's cemented by creating experiences that prove that new identity. Let's look at another example. Alcoholics Anonymous. AA doesn't help people stop drinking. They help people become a person in recovery. First words at every meeting. My name is, and I am an alcoholic. Present tense identity. Not I want to quit or not I'm trying not to drink. They layer on new rituals, meetings, sponsor calls, 12 steps. They have a new language, one day at a time, higher power. And then they give you a new community, fellow members who are going to share that identity. And research shows that members who strongly identify with a person in recovery have significantly higher longer-term sobriety rates than those who just show up and identify as I want to quit. That's how powerful identity is. Let's look at a third example, medical school. Medical schools now explicitly teach something called professional identity formation. From the white coat ceremony on day one to the Hippocratic Oath at graduation, the symbols are there, the white coat, the stethoscope, the title doctor. They install language, so they use medical terminology. We, the profession, they talk in language that the ordinary person wouldn't understand. And then they have rituals, rounds, morning reports, case presentations, and then mentorship. Residents model what it means to be a doctor's. Students with a stronger professional identity have higher resilience, better decision-making under pressure, greater commitment to ethics, and lower burnout. That's the pattern of elite organizations, every elite organization, military, recovery, medicine, every one of them engineers identity. They don't hope people change. They systematically build an identity, and then the environment makes it stick. I learned this in a powerful way in the cult I grew up in. I mentioned earlier that I was born into a cult. And what I didn't share is how masterfully they engineered identity and how studying their methods taught me everything about identity-based commitment. So let me give you a glimpse into their systems. And once you see it, you're going to understand it, and you'll see why it works anywhere humans are asked to give their best. I was born into a high control religious group. I didn't have a choice in the matter. I spent 10,000 plus hours knocking on doors, giving the cult's pitch as an unpaid volunteer. I was recruited, training, and mentoring others to do the same, and realized there was no financial incentives. There was no threat of unemployment. It was pure environment and belief. And I'll tell you, people lined up to do it. Why? Because they didn't just have members. They had a brilliantly designed identity system, and it was a tiered identity system. The level one, they called you an unbaptized publisher. So if you were an unbaptized publisher, you were allowed to participate in the door-to-door work, what they called knocking, but you weren't official yet. It was just a proving ground. You could get a little taste of the identity, but you hadn't fully committed to it. At level two, you became what they called a baptized publisher. So after baptism, you could earn the base identity. You were one of us now. You would report your hours monthly. There would be a visible record of commitment that others could see. At level three, you could become what they called an auxiliary pioneer. An auxiliary pioneer would spend 50 plus hours a month knocking on doors. It was the first elite tier. You got special recognition, and you knew that people would look at you differently in the group. Level four was something that I did for years, being a regular pioneer. You would spend 90 hours a month, every single month, the ultimate identity, elite, the most committed, the ones that everyone admired. They had special classes for you, special events for you. You stood out as different. And then they had another level five, which was all the leadership roles reserved for males: ministerial servant, elder, circuit overseer, district overseer. Each of them came with increasing status and identity weight. Now, here's the brilliance. Each tier came with a new title. So you would have an identity label. It would also have new responsibilities. So there would be proof experience. Think about it, an identity. How do you get an identity? Any identity is really an action repeated over time will give you evidence that you are that thing. You think about it in fitness. You might not start out as thinking of yourself as an athlete. It might not be your identity, but if you start going to the gym regularly, you take that action, you repeat it over time, eventually it becomes an identity. I am an athlete. That's the brilliant. So a new title, new responsibility, taking action gives that identity, it cements it. And you get new recognition. So you get the social reinforcement that you're doing the right thing, and with new expectations raising the bar. So here's what's powerful. I don't care who you were, people would not stay at level one. The whole system was designed to pull you upward, further and further. Once you tasted level three, going back to level two felt like failure. Stepping down from pioneer to regular publisher, it felt shameful. Sound familiar? This is exactly what elite sales organizations do. SDR to account executive, to senior executive, to team lead, to manager. But most companies just change the title. The cult changed the identity. Every single day, members engaged in activities that reinforced that identity. As an example, they had a morning routine, personal Bible study, 30 to 60 minutes. The identity message was, I am a student of the scripture. Remember, identity comes from an action repeated over time that gives evidence. That evidence becomes identity. In the door-to-door ministry, you would knock on doors 2 to 4 times a week, minimum. The identity message is, I am a minister. I am an evangelizer. Again, an action repeated over time gives proof of an identity. So every single door you knocked was proof. I'm someone who does hard things. I'm committed. I'm different than everyone else. And here's the genius of rejection, because when you knocked on people's door, you got rejection. Most people really, when you think about it, would never knock on a stranger's door to talk about religion, but the act itself proved the identity. And when someone slammed the door, it didn't weaken my commitment, it strengthened it. It was proof. The world rejects truth, but I'm strong enough to endure rejection. I'm one of the faithful few. So think about how this translates to sales. If your salespeople make 50 cold calls per day and get rejected 45 times, they should leave thinking, I'm someone who does what others won't. I'm mentally tough. I'm elite. But most sales managers, because they haven't designed their system, they make rejection feel like failure. But elite managers make rejection feel like proof of a warrior identity. Battle scars are the symbol of belonging. And then the cult had a monthly reporting system. It was public accountability. Every month, every culture member submitted a report. How many hours did you spend in the ministry? The number of conversations, the number of return visits, how many follow-ups did you do? The number of Bible studies started. These numbers were tracked, compared, and publicly acknowledged. Pioneers who hit their 90 hours got public recognition. Those who didn't, well, you had to explain why. And failing to report your numbers would result in losing privileges or having a title, being called an irregular publisher. And for sure, that made you an outcast. Think about the psychological mechanism. Your identity wasn't based on what you said you were. It was based on what you repeatedly did. And everyone knew the numbers. If you claimed to be committed, but you only reported 5 hours, your identity claim was just invalidated by the data. If you consistently reported 90 hours or more, no one questioned your identity. Identity isn't aspirational, it's evidential. Pay attention to that. Identity isn't aspirational, it's evidential. So when we think about how do we create identity, and if you want to build a high-performance organization, if you want to build an unrecruitable team, you're going to start by recruiting people's identity and having the ability to build people's identity. And identity comes from action. An action repeated over time becomes evidence of the identity. So identity isn't aspirational, it's evidential. And action. So we're going to talk about how do you create identity. But think just about the parallel for sales teams. You don't just call someone a top performer. Make them prove it with metrics that everyone sees. At Andy Elliott's group, everyone knows everyone's number. It's not to shame, but it's to validate claims. If you say, I'm elite, and you made 20 calls last week, the data says that you're not. But if you made 250 calls and closed 5 deals, the data confirms the identity. And don't forget the power of public declaration. At every meeting in the cult, 3 to 5 times a week, members were asked to answer questions during study sessions. They would give public comments. They would share experiences from their ministry. And so every time you raised your hand and you spoke, you were publicly declaring your identity. Research shows that public commitments are exponentially more powerful than private ones. So when you state something in front of a group, your brain works harder to maintain consistency with that statement. You see, the cult designed constant opportunities for public declaration. I had an encouraging experience this week. I'm committed. I placed 3 magazines. I'm effective. I started a new Bible study. I'm successful. So what's your takeaway? If you're a sales boss, if you're a sales leader, you can create opportunities for your team to publicly declare their identity. In daily meetings, what did you accomplish yesterday that you're proud of? That's a public declaration of competence. What's your target this week? Public commitment. Who crushed it last week? Public recognition of identity. When someone stands up and says, I closed 3 deals last week, they're not just reporting numbers, they're declaring, I am a closer. And their brain is going to work to maintain consistency with that declaration. The identity lock, though, is really what happens when you leave. This is the darkest, but most instructive mechanism of the cult. The cost of leaving. The cost of leaving was complete identity destruction. If you left, you lost your entire social network, everyone you knew, your family relationships, they were required to shun you, your sense of purpose and meaning, your understanding of who you were, completely gone. So people stayed not just because they believed the doctrine, they stayed because leaving meant losing their entire family. Members who faded away often suffered severe depression, anxiety, identity crisis. They took years to rebuild their entire sense of self from scratch. Now, I'm not suggesting that you make leaving your company traumatic, but understand this. When someone's identity is deeply fused with their role, they become unrecruitable, not because they're trapped, but because leaving would mean giving up who they become. At the Elliott Group, people don't just work there. They are the Elliott Army. It's woven into their identity, their self-concept, their social circle, their daily proof experiences. When a competitor offers more money, they're not just declining a job offer, they're defending their identity. Now, let's talk about the critical distinction. The cult used these mechanisms to trap people, to exploit them. That's exploitation, engineering identity to trap people in a situation that harms them. What I'm teaching you is elevation. Engineering identity that helps people become the best version of themselves, the best leaders, the best humans, the best fathers, the best mothers, the best children, the best members of their community, with fitness, with faith, with taking care of their finances. It's the same mechanism, but with opposite intent. So when someone on your team believes, I'm a warrior, I'm a lead, I'm a part of something bigger than myself, I'm someone who does hard things, and they have daily proof experiences that validate their identity, they become unrecruitable. Not because they're being manipulated, but because they become someone they're proud to be. That's the difference between exploitation and elevation. That's the lesson the cult taught me. And that's the lesson I want to teach leaders. The cult experience taught me that identity is the most powerful retention tool that exists. Not compensation, not perks, not titles, the identity. Let's face it, your team is always being engineered by something. Every day, the environment you've created or the one you've allowed to exist by default, it's shaping what your people think, how they feel, and how they act. And that action repeated over time becomes the evidence of their identity. The question is, by what and by whom is that being shaped? Are you engineering identity intentionally, or are you leaving it to chance? So when I finally left the cult, I lost everything. I lost my family, my community, my identity. I had to rebuild from absolute zero. I had to discover who I was outside this environment I grew up in. That rebuild is what led me to do this work. And everything I've shared today, the tiered identity system, the daily reinforcement, the public declarations, the identity lock, these are the same mechanisms I now help leaders use ethically to build teams that are genuinely unrecruitable. In the next video, I'm going to show you exactly how to see where your current culture is with brutal clarity, not the way you want to see it, not through your eyes, but through the eyes of the A player you want to attract. It's called the Think, Feel, Act framework. It's going to completely change the way you lead.